On today's show, our off-season window shopping continues with an area of need for the Ottawa Senators. We're going to look at the market on defense.
And we continue our 2024 NHL Draft Prospect Profiles with three very different forwards.
We're going to get into all that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory, while Brandon Piller is over in Utah. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Need last-minute tickets? Lowest prices? Guaranteed? Well, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can also follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter and LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. Today is Thursday, June 6th, and Pilsy, I'm putting up a poll at Sens Central right now. Where is the greatest need for the Sens? Yesterday, we talked about goaltending. Today, it's all about defense. I'm going to vote the former. I think getting a goalie is a little bit more important, but certainly good defense in front of whoever's in net would go a long way.
Yeah, and there's a handful of people on Twitter that believe you don't have to do anything with the goaltending. You just need to shore up the decor, and that in turn is going to help the goaltending, which I understand that thinking, but I do think they need to figure out goaltending. If they weren't statistically the worst goaltending tandem in the league last season, maybe you could convince me otherwise, but it's clear that this team does not defend well enough to be able to be in playoff contention, and there's going to be a lot of movement on the back end. We expect Jacob Chychrun is going to be traded. We expect the Ottawa Senators are going to acquire at least one right-hand shot defenseman. So there's certainly a lot of moving parts on that back end.
There certainly is, and right shot has to be the priority. We're expected to find out right after the Stanley Cup Finals that the Senators will not extend a qualifying offer to Erik Brannstrom, which fans will have differing opinions. We've certainly gone head-to-head on this subject a million times on Locked On Sens, but at the same time, you're looking from it from a managerial perspective. That's $2 million that can be reallocated to the style of defenseman, or at least the handedness of defensemen that you need going forward. The Senators can't have 4 of their 6 defensemen and 4 of their 5 best defensemen shooting the same way. We've seen it. We've tried it. It didn't work. You can do it in a pinch, but for a long-term solution, it can't. I didn't realize how important it was until you hear Mark Mathot talk, but you hear guys who've played the game at a high level. The split seconds, Pillsy, they're that important that if you're taking a time to go from your backhand to forehand to look up the ice, by that point, a forechecker's already hounding you for the puck. So our list has a lot of right shot influence. The trade market, a little more unpredictable for defense and forwards. Goalies, we have our 3 that we kind of talked about yesterday, but I think we're going to focus just on free agents for the back end because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not very often that there's a lot of defensemen on the market, and especially, Ross, a lot of right-hand shot defensemen. Usually teams get those guys re-signed and keep them in the system. So there is an opportunity here, and that's not to say that teams won't do that. They still might, but there is an opportunity here for the Sens to find 1 or 2 right-hand shot defensemen in free agency.
Let's get to the list, but Pilsy, don't forget to remind me that we're going to look at the poll at Sens Central. Where's the Sens' biggest area of need? Goalies, defense, forward. Simple. The answer's coming up after we take a look at the list of top unrestricted free agent targets. At the top, the only player where it's no secret that Steve Staios wants his hands on him. It's like the cone of silence over the Senators organization, except for Chris Tanev. Reports were they tried to convince him at the deadline to move his no-trade clause. Ultimately, he ends up in Dallas and goes on to have a fantastic playoffs where he shut down some of the top players in the league. Look at the stats when Nathan MacKinnon was out on the ice against Tanev versus when they were off apart from one another. In round one, Jack Eichel did absolutely nothing. It was an impressive showing on the back end for Chris Tanev. However, all we hear about Dallas is it's a great place to play, great team, great future, great young talent coming up. I think as every day passes, I'm coming to solace with the fact that Pilsy Tanev's staying in Dallas. I can't get my hopes up. I don't want to be hurt. I'm convinced Tanev will be re-signing in Dallas.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility, Ross. Now, the fact that he did not waive his no move to come to Ottawa at the deadline, for me, isn't a fully closed door. If I'm Chris Tanev, I don't blame him. He's looking at the Senators being like, you guys aren't even close to being close to the playoffs. I'm trying to go to a contender here, get some more ice time, get some shine, and get a big UFA deal, probably his last big UFA deal. So I don't blame him for that. But maybe, Ross, this is a situation where the Senators say, hey, look, we know you didn't want to come during the season, but it's the off season. We're making big changes. We got new management. We got big new ideas, and we want you to be a part of it. And they throw an offer at him that he can't refuse. And then you get a deal done like that. Because I believe, Ross, for both of us and most of Sens fans, Chris Tanev is the top target.
Chris Tanev is, however, on the back nine of his career. He's 34 years old, will be 35 during next season. And as one commenter, Citizen, just said, Tanev's got some hard miles on his tires. So he's the kind of guy, too, the way he plays, he looks like he's about a millimeter away from a serious injury every shift, the way he hits and blocks shots. But he's a culture guy and a leadership type player as well. And we've got a few more of those on this list. So Chris Tanev is, I think, the number one target internally for the Senators. If that falls apart, Brett Pesce has had a great time with the Carolina Hurricanes. We'll see what happens with the Hurricanes. They've got some decisions to make with Jacob Slavin as well. And obviously Burns isn't getting any younger. And that's a decor that's been together for a while. Haven't been able to get over the hump, but every regular season, they're right at the top of the list. So Brett Pesce, another kind of modern day shutdown skating defenseman. The points don't jump out on many of these players, if any, but it's what they do away from the puck and defensively that make them good targets for the Ottawa Senators. Pilsy, who would be your top target outside of Tanev?
Well, my top target outside of Tanev would be Dylan DeMello. What is this decor searching for years since Dylan DeMello left? A partner for Thomas Chabot. And Dylan DeMello was a great partner for Thomas Chabot. However, Ross, and you can speak on this more than I can, I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to do what it takes to get him signed and staying there. So although I love him and I think it'd be great, I don't necessarily know if Dylan DeMello is a realistic target here because I think he's going to stay in Winnipeg. He's
got a pretty good gig here on a pair with Josh Morrissey. Those two were elite all season long. What was he, a plus 40 during the regular season, Dylan DeMello? So he's certainly found a home here. And that brings us to Brendan Dillon, because it seems like it's kind of one or the other. Who are the Winnipeg Jets going to be able to keep? And Brendan Dillon is the only left shot on this list. I think it would take some maneuvering, maybe even a shocking moment where both Chychrun and Chabot are moved out, which I don't think is going to happen, but stranger things have in the National Hockey League with Jake Sanderson's extension kicking in this summer. And so too does Thomas Chabot's no move clause, 10-team, I believe, on July 1st.
Yep.
But Brendan Dillon, if the Senators do need a left shot defenseman, he just fits every other part of what the Sens are looking for. High character, high compete, solid in his own zone, hits like a truck, is just kind of your prototypical top four left shot guy. Physical, would be a great mentor for Tyler Clevin as well. So I just threw him on there as kind of like an honorable mention. I think he ends up either New Jersey, his hometown Vancouver. They're shaking up their decor. Ian Cole won't be back. Is there room for Brendan Dillon there? Some other names, look, Colin Miller. We're basically taking Winnipeg's playoff D pairs, except for Colin Miller didn't really get an opportunity. He's more known from his time with the Vegas Golden Knights, a little bit in Buffalo and then New Jersey before the trade. But to me, he'd be a great bottom pair option that you're not paying over Branny. You're basically would be reallocating Brandstrom for a bigger right shot defenseman in Colin Miller. So I threw him there as a low leverage, but you could get some use out of a Colin Miller on a 1 or 2 year deal.
Yeah, and he provides a little more offense than Brandy's been able to, and a little more veteran presence. Another guy I really like, Ross, is Yanni Hakanpää. I've been following this guy for a couple of years and targeting him seemingly every offseason. If you want a hard-nosed veteran right shot defenseman that plays a physical game, Hakanpää is one of the best out there. And the Dallas Stars, if you talk to anyone from the organization or fans, they really missed him in the playoffs, as I believe, he didn't play a single playoff game. I believe he was hurt. So that's a guy you want in your lineup. I would love to have him on a bottom pair.
Okay, there you have it. Our list of defensive targets in the unrestricted free agency market. Let us know in the comments of this list or outside of it, who do you want to see sign with the Senators on July 1st? Pilsy, tomorrow we will do the forward market. We're going to make sure to put out a tweet at Sens Central. And as promised, the results of the poll. Pilsy, before I unveil them, as I always like to do to put you on the spot, what's your guess? What's the citizens' biggest concern, our area of need going forward? Is it the blue line or the goal line?
Full disclosure, I have not seen this, so this is a honest guess here. I'm going to process of elimination. I know it's not the forwards.
How many? Give me a percentage guess of the forwards, the goofballs out there.
11%.
2.4%.
Wow. Okay. You know what?
This thing's shaking and grooving on the fly, by the way.
I'm going to say defense. Okay, goaltending.
The majority for the goalies, 53.1%.
So defense is pretty close, though. Got to be in the mid 40s.
Yes, math guy there. 43.1, 42.9. We're moving it. It's over 150 votes. Still time to get yours in. Let us know the Senators' biggest area of need. Pilsy, we just listened to Mike Yeo on TSN 1200 this morning. What was your biggest takeaway from him?
This is a guy with so much experience, and they were asking, his connections throughout the league, and he has a lot of connections. And I feel like he is an assistant coach that has so much head coaching experience that it's nice to have him in Ottawa. And I think he's the perfect guy to have an assistant coach along with Baumgartner and obviously Alfie. So Travis Green has a nice staff around him, and I think that's key if you want to start moving this team in the proper direction.
Oh, we're getting closer to the draft as well. The Ottawa Senators pick 7th and 25th. Stay tuned for the Locked On mock draft coming up. We just made our pick at 25. I think it's a name that the Sens community hasn't talked a whole lot about, but we will be discussing him further tomorrow in our draft rankings. Today, we'll get back to our rankings now with a trio of potential Sens picks. That's next. You're listening to Locked On Sens.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Guys, you know Game Time is the official ticketing app of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we love Game Time because they've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and lowest price guarantee, so Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And it's not just sports tickets. You can get tickets for music, concerts, comedy, theater. Anytime you want to have a fun night out on the town, you got to check out Game Time first. And you don't need to plan ahead. Last minute tickets. They got flash deals, zone deals. Ross loves the views from your seat, so you can make sure everything is how you want it when you get there. There's no surprises. The lowest price guarantee is clutch. They even have event cancellation protection. So there's no better place to get a ticket than Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
All right, a reminder, you can follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. All right, coming in at number 26 on our 2024 Locked On Senators Draft Rankings, we're going over to Russia for Nikita Artamonov, an intelligent playmaker who happened to be outshined by another draft-eligible Anton Silyev, but himself, Artamonov, Pilsy, is a very cerebral player.
Yeah, Ross, right away, you got to look at how impressive it is for him to have played 54 KHL games last season. I mean, you don't get a lot of prospects that are able to play in a pro league that long, let alone the KHL. So, right off the bat, that stands out to me.
It certainly does. So too does the fact that in his first 11 games in the KHL, he had 8 points. So he came out swinging at the start of the season. Elite Prospects talked about just how well his playmaking was, his passing. He seems to know where his teammates are. And I found it interesting that Elite Prospects was higher on him than almost anybody else in our rankings. Elite Prospects has him at 25, Chris Peters at 21, Corey Prodman down at 30, Bob McKenzie 34, McKean's at 41. Not even ranked with Craig Button. I think this is the last guy to not be ranked by anyone on our list. He comes in with an average of 31.8. Nikita Artamonov is 5'11", 187 pounds, a November birthday. So one of the older players in this draft. Classic Russian, shoots left, plays right wing on his offside. Pilsy, he has a great year against men in the KHL, 23 points, -6, but then he went back down to play against his own age group in the playoffs, picked up right where he left off, 6 goals, 10 points in 11 games. If he was 6'3", same skill set, we'd be talking about a lottery pick, not a guy at the end of the second round, start of the second round, end of the first round. But this is kind of the range I would expect him, maybe even a little bit lower on my list.
Yeah, I'm with you, Ross. If this guy had a little bit more size to him, I think he'd be a lot higher on our list because he plays a tough game. He's got a high motor. He doesn't shy away from physicality. And being able to play that much in the KHL, that's a tough men's league. And he's not just one of those players that's getting a couple shifts, 5-6 minutes a night. From the game logs I was looking at on EP, he's averaging right around 15 minutes a night, where for a young forward to be doing that is very impressive. So you'll love to see that. It's very surprising to me, Ross, that EP is the highest on his guy, because a lot of their kind of negatives about him is they didn't love his skating mechanics, which usually is their kind of top valued attribute for prospects. So they must really see a lot of potential in Artamonov, despite his skating mechanics not being their favorite.
What Elite Prospects is saying about him too is the fact that he has a B game, right? If he's not going offensively one night, he's able to contribute in other ways, breaking up defensive schemes, penalty killing, doing all the little things that are going to catch as a coach and a scout's eye. So I think that he's one of those high floor. It's just a matter of what the ceiling is. He going to be a top 6 contributor? I'd say the odds are against him a little bit. Under 6 feet tall, but he could still become a very solid top 9 contributor. So I think he's also a kind of guy that could be in your lineup a little bit sooner. Obviously, the Russian factor aside, unsure about the contract situation for him, but he's a guy to me in like 3 years could be in a top 9 and maybe even coming over at the end of a season and helping a team push for the playoff spot and hopefully bring a little bit of that grit and sandpaper to a lineup over here in the NHL eventually.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. I think, a bottom 9 spot for him is definitely attainable, because when you're a guy that's able to be such a good playmaker like he is, and then you're able to play that physical game, he's a classic kind of modern day power forward where he's able to move the puck around, keep the tempo going, keep the pace of play going, while also being like, hey, if you want to slow things down and play kind of a meat and potatoes physical style game, he can do that as well. So I really think that this is going to be a guy that contending teams that are looking for a quicker pro development are going to go after. Ross, I know they're not a contending team, but I've got Washington Capitals written all over this guy. Like, I feel like he would really fit in there.
No, definitely. And the motor's going to fit in. Obviously, they got Ryan Leonard last year. But look, with Artamonov, what I'm just catching up on his offense. And you look at the numbers and the company that he's in, dude, points per game for an under 18 player in the KHL. The company that he's with, Matvei Michkov, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Artemi Panarin. The only players in the KHL's 15-year history to have a better points per game as a U18 player forward. So that in itself, pretty impressive that he's picking up the offense over there. I would love a team to draft him, knowing, like Washington, they've done it before, that they can get him over here sooner rather than later, because you don't want to be waiting 4 or 5 years for this type of player. You're getting him to help your lineup, like Pilsy said, sooner rather than later. We know the Sens need help, but is Artamonov the guy? Pilsy, your Sens stars.
Well, Ross, I could see if the Capitals did draft him, Ovi's just got to get on the phone, and I think he could get something done. And the enticement of having him learn from Tom Wilson, I think, would go a long way as well, right? So that's definitely a fit there. Having said that, he's not exactly a top fit for me with the Ottawa Senators. I give him 3 stars here. I do see the potential. I do respect how well he's doing in the KHL at a young age, but I just... This is not a guy I see fitting in the Sens prospect system here.
For me, at 39, it's a good spot for Artamonov. I've got him at 38 as I'm continuing to plug and play as we do our countdown where I have guys in my rankings. It's obviously subject to change, but I've got him right in that range where there's enough upside that I can justify the pick, but I do like a few other options there as well. So I'm going to be interested to see where Nikita Artamonov lands on draft night. He'll be one of those guys who, he came out of nowhere. No, not really. This guy's been pretty solid over there in Russia. And he comes in at number 26 on our Locked On Senators NHL Draft Rankings. All right. On the other side, a pair more, one over from Finland and another from Prince George. This guy puts the puck in the net. That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day. All right, a reminder, you can follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. Coming in at number 25 on our Locked On Senators NHL Draft Rankings from the WHL, it's Terik Parascak, a high IQ shooter that put the puck in the net 43 times this past season.
Yeah, but putting the puck in the back of the net isn't the only thing he does, Ross. He can dish it out as well. I mean, anytime you get a player putting up triple digits in points, it's pretty damn impressive. But how about a guy doing it who is in his rookie season in the WHL? Sure, he played 4 games before, but full rookie season, 68 games with the Prince George Cougars, 43 goals, 62 assists, a plus 49. And Ross, what I thought was the craziest thing about this is right away, I looked at 105 points and I was like, wow, I wonder how many more points he has than the rest of his teammates. Yeah, no, he was 3rd on his list in points with 105 points. So clearly this guy got to play with some high-end players and some players we've covered in the past, actually. Yeah, definitely. You think back to Riley Haight last year, and that was just a great team out in Prince George. Hockey Sense comes to mind when you're talking about Terik Parascak and what he's really bringing to the table. I like the shades of for elite prospects. They have Tyler Toffoli, so think of that. Yep. A shooter down the wing, maybe not the most pace. We'll get to his skating, but a guy who can shoot, pass, and find his teammates in the right spot. He's a May 06 birthday, 6 feet tall, 173-pound right winger with an average rank of 30.6. Bob McKenzie at 27. Craig Button, 13th overall for Terik Parascak, 20th for Scott Wheeler, 37 for Corey Pronman, 36 for Elite Prospects, 28 for Chris Peters, and 53 for McKeans. Pilsy already rattled off the stats. Very impressive. So too is 14 points during 12 playoff games. Prince George, though, had championship aspirations, so probably unfortunate for Parascak that he couldn't make it a longer push into the WHL playoffs and ultimately to the Memorial Cup. I really like this player. I think the upside is solid. You think back to what the Sens are looking for in this draft class. It's high hockey IQ and high character. I think you're going to get that from Terik Parascak. So to me, he's an option
in the 39 range. Not for me at 25. I just think there's higher upside and some guys who would fit a bit better for the Senators. But I think that a team who gets this player, you could see you could see it up to 50 goals next season in the WHL. I think he does have that type of skill, and we'll see how it translates once he turns pro.
Yeah, I think a team that drafts him is immediately going to have a blue chip prospect, and he's going to be one of the top guys in any prospect pipeline. like 105 points. We got to. I know we've already said it, but it's got to be echoed. It's wild to put up those numbers. And what I like about Parascak, Ross, is he's a guy that plays the power play and the penalty kill, and he's so good in tight by the net. Like, I was watching his highlights. A lot of his goals are in tight and off rebounds. So if you're looking for a player that has a nose for the net and is going to be right in that dangerous area without getting too close to the crease to trigger goaltender interference goals and disallowed goals, I think Parascak is the perfect guy here. And clearly, he's able to play with high-skilled players, as he was able to put up points in bunches with the rest of his teammates.
I'm a lot lower on Parascak than Craig Button is, who has him as a lottery pick. I see him as a second-round pick for me. I just think if you're going to have the skating deficiency, and maybe that's in a needs work category, skating, I'll need you to be a little bit, kind of bring a little bit more size, because that has me worried where it's like the size isn't there, the skating isn't there, because those are two obviously very critical aspects when you're developing a prospect. And I find the quotables, the industry chatter segment of the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, a must get in draft season, very interesting. One scout called him a pure passenger. Another said that a draft by numbers guys are going to love this guy, but that he's not a first round talent. So that to me is interesting kind of pushback to where we're talking about all the top skills that he has. And another NHL scout saying that he has first round puck play, but that he probably slips into the second round. But look, this to me, if you have multiple picks in the top 50, why not take a swing if you're with your early second round pick on a guy like Terik Parascak? Because especially if you get a guy who can complement him with one of your first picks. I do think that he might be more of a Robin than a Batman, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, Ross, to play devil's advocate, I'll tell you why teams might not want to take a swing on him. The biggest issue, and EP really hits home about this, is in the games that they tracked, he did not do well transitioning the puck up the ice. In fact, he did very poorly in that. And the quote from EP here, I think this really tells it. Not dynamic enough to be a play driver and not physical enough to translate his current game. So that's the issue, is once the puck's in the O-zone, and if he's got high-end line mates and teammates like he did with the Prince George Cougars, he's going to be able to thrive. But put him on a line where he's expected to be a play driver in maybe a top 6 position in the NHL, he's going to need a guy that's able to transition the puck up the ice. He's going to need a guy that's going to be a play driver on his line. And I think that's where NHL scouts are saying, look, if we're going to spend a second round pick or a first round pick on this guy, he's got to figure out how to move the puck up the ice by himself. We can't have him be a passenger like you mentioned. So that would be the one kind of red flag for Parascak for me.
He is an offensive weapon, though. Where does he come in for your Sens stars?
So I got him at 3.5 stars here. So as you guys know, 3.5 stars for me is I like the player, I like the tools, but I just don't think he's going to be a guy for the Sens. I definitely don't think they should take him at 25, and I don't think he's going to make it to 39, Ross. So I think he's not really in the range, and I don't know if the Sens can afford to take a risk on a guy like Parascak. Again, if your team just drafted him, though, I think you're going to get a blue chip prospect, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be fun to watch develop. But there's so many other options in the Sens range that I would like them to go a different direction.
We just finished speaking about Nikita Artamonov. Out of those two forwards, who's higher on your list?
I've got Parascak higher on my list just because I see a little bit more potential and I like the swing of it if you're a team. But it's going to be very interesting to see where this guy goes. Because like you mentioned, from Scout Chatter, from EP's draft guide, some people are totally sold. Some people are like, not so sure.
We're going to find out on June 28th, the NHL draft in Vegas. We'll be boots on the ground, so make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast for behind the scenes footage. Oh, and we've got all 80 of our draft profiles on YouTube. All right, coming in at number 24 on our Locked On Senators NHL Draft Rankings, it's Emil Hemming out in TPS Liga. Right wing, 6'1", 201 pounds, and according to Bob McKenzie, he's a lottery pick at 15th overall.
That's intense that Bob McKenzie has him that high, Ross. As we know, we've got a lot of respect for where Bob puts players as he gets a lot of input from NHL scouts around the league. So that's saying something. And look, we talked about Artamonov, lots of great pro experience in the KHL. Well, Hemming's right there with pro experience, except in Liga with TPS. We already covered Koivu, a teammate of his earlier on in our draft ranking. But Hemming, in 40 Liga games, gets 7 goals, 4 assists, good for 11 points. Now, maybe that doesn't jump off the page to you, but you got to remember this is a pro league, a young kid playing in a pro league, and he more translates to a two-way forward rather than an elite offensive talent.
And maybe even a one-way forward being defense. I don't know how much offensive upside there's going to be for him in the NHL. The games that Mitch Brown tracked in the Liga, just nothing offensively. 7 percentile out of 100. Not doing it, but 67 percentile on the back end. That being said, the shot to me is very solid. So you think that maybe he could just be a spot up shooter. For me, I'm in agreement after watching some highlight tapes on Emil Hemming. It's like they nailed it with the shades of. And it's a guy who Ottawa Senators fans will know well. He does it all. It's Nick Paul. Nick Paul, to me, obviously has a bit more size than Hemming does. At 6'3", 6'4", Nick Paul is able to kind of control the middle of the ice and become that full-time centerman. But when Nick Paul played the wing, he had to be a bit of a modern-day power forward, a guy who's strong defensively, but find ways to chip in on offense. Now, playing against his own age group, he has. Hemming had 4 goals, 6 points in 5 games at the World Under-18s. Very good. There's a good motor on him for sure. I just worry about the hockey sense a little bit. Now, he's, to me, a high-floor guy. I think he's going to play NHL games, but I don't know if it's going to be a fourth-line guy or a guy who can contribute on a secondary special teams and play a 5-on-5 with very talented players as well.
I would push back a little bit, Ross, on you saying you're concerned about the offense. Because keep in mind that we're looking at Liga numbers here. So sure, 7 goals, 4 assists, not great. But let's turn things over to TPS U20, where he was an assistant captain in 13 games. He's got 11 goals, 7 assists, 18 points in 13 games, almost a goal per game guy. And then you look at the playoffs in the U20, in 11 games, he's got 5 goals, 5 assists for 10 points. So I think that's important when you're looking at guys that played majority of their time in pro leagues. You got to kind of also take a look at how they do amongst their peers. And amongst his peers, he's putting up big points, often more than a point per game. So I really see there is offensive upside here. Now, is he going to be lighting it up points-wise? No, I don't think so. But I think the shades of Nick Paul is the perfect spot to put him. He's not going to be a top 6 guy, but if you put him in opportunities to have offensive chances, I think he can connect on those. And he's just got such a great shot. I love the highlights that I saw of his shot were he rips it. And I think he's going to be a bottom 6 winger that gets time on a second power play unit.
Yeah, I think that would be a very good finished product of Emil Hemming. And then Elite Prospects Draft Guide, of course, you have to have the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, 1,904 pages, and they have the industry chatter, which we love to check. One Eastern Conference scout saying that he has the shot to score goals in the NHL and also has the speed and strength to play the power game. He's ready to play in the AHL next season. So could he come over right away? I think that would be a fantastic decision for both him and the team.
Yeah, I agree. Liga and AHL is probably pretty close to being comparable. So, or at least one of the closer leagues to the AHL. So I think he would be able to do it. And I think he would get a top 6 role on an AHL team. And he just has such a good tool set. I think he's going to be a really effective bottom 6 winger, but I will admit he's one of those high floor, low ceiling guys. Like, I think he's going to be a two-way forward that rips it. And that's kind of it. Like, I don't think he's going to develop much more speed or playmaking ability or anything like that that's going to allow him to bounce up a lineup. But look, you're looking for guys that can defend well and a great shot on a second power play unit. A lot of teams are coveting that.
And he'll kill penalties too. Pillsy, Sens stars for Emil Hemming.
Emil Hemming, I've got him at 3 stars here, Ross. I like the player, but I need a little bit more of a swing in potential upside. So I don't think the Sens really should target him with picks 25 or 39.
Okay, there you have it. The scouting report for Emil Hemming. And if your team just drafted him, you might be seeing him in the show a little bit sooner rather than not. Oh, I forgot to mention, I had Bob McKenzie's ranking. I got all excited. Well, Scott Wheeler's pretty high on him as well at 18th overall. And then there's a big drop. McKean's at 25, Button at 28, Peters at 29, and elite prospects at 40. And then Corey Prodman at 50 on their list. So those guys obviously wanted to bet on upside elsewhere. But for us, Emil Hemming comes in at number 24 on our Locked On Senators NHL Draft Rankings. All right, that's going to do it for another show from us. A reminder for more to follow us on social media at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. Hope you have a great day. Thanks so much for watching, listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more targets and more draft rankings. That's Brandon Piller. I'm Ross Levitan. You've been listening to the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.